I've been plugging in here every morning for 4 months and you never said a word. Don't start now.
Ma'am, it's my outlet, on my house.
Your house? The shack your dead grandfather left because nobody else wanted it? I spend more on my nails than your electric bill. Move!
Please stop taking my electricity.
Taking? I'm the HOA president. I cut 2 of your pathetic little padlocks to keep using this outlet. I'll cut the next one before breakfast. You're a plumber on a dead-end road. You don't get to tell me anything.
She came back the next morning. And the one after that. She didn't know what that outlet powered. She was about to find out, and she was wearing white. Have you ever watched someone's entire wardrobe become a casualty of their own entitlement because you are about to drop a comment, hit like, and let me take you back to the beginning, because this woman earned every single drop of what was coming for her. The first time I caught her, she was standing behind my azalea bushes at 7:15 on a Tuesday morning, feeding a bright orange extension cord through the gap in the lattice, like a woman who had done this 100 times because she had.
What are you doing?
She jumped. Not the jump of a woman who'd been startled, the jump of a woman who'd been caught. There's a difference. One is involuntary. The other comes with a facial expression that cycles through surprise, calculation, and the decision to lie, all in about a quarter second.
Oh, Nolan. I didn't see you there.
She smiled the way a woman smiles when she's been unplugging your property for months and just realized the property owner has eyes.
I was just borrowing a tiny bit of power. My landscape lights need charging, and my outdoor outlet is on the wrong side of the house.
You've been plugging into my electrical panel.
It's just a trickle. You'd never even notice.
I noticed. My electric bill went up $87 last month.
She waved one manicured hand, gel extensions the color of Chanel Rouge Noir, filed to a coffin shape that cost $85 every 2 weeks at a nail studio in Hickory, where the chairs had built-in massage functions and the smallest tip on the menu was 20%. The nails were immaculate. The wave was dismissive. The combination suggested a woman who had perfected the art of making theft look like an inconvenience you were causing her.
$87? Nolan, don't be dramatic. That's less than my blowout.
It's my electricity.
It's one outlet, on the side of your house, facing my yard.
She said it like proximity was ownership, like the fact that my outlet was visible from her property meant it operated under her jurisdiction the way a woman who spends $450 on her hair every 6 weeks might confuse line of sight with legal authority.
Unplug it.
Nolan.
Unplug it now.
She unplugged the cord, slowly. The way a woman removes a Cartier bracelet before a spa treatment with the clear intention of putting it right back on, the second no one's watching. What she didn't know, what she wouldn't know for another 4 months, was that the outlet she'd been stealing from didn't just power my porch light and the outlet strip where I charged my drill batteries. That circuit powered my aerobic septic treatment unit, the aerator, the effluent pump, the control panel. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Every time she plugged in her leaf blower, her heated cat house, her landscape accent lights, every time she drew enough current to trip the GFCI breaker, she killed power to the system that kept raw sewage from backing up into my yard. And every time the power died, the waste accumulated a little more. The pressure built a little higher. The sludge thickened into something that stopped resembling wastewater and started resembling revenge. She didn't find out from a letter. She didn't find out from a lawyer. She didn't find out in a courtroom. She found out the way you find out you've been standing downhill from 4 months of backed-up sewage, the hard way, the wet way, and in a pair of $340 aloe yoga leggings, snow white worn exactly once. I never planned to live in my grandfather's house. After Cora died, ovarian cancer 9 months from the scan that found it to the morning I sat in a hospital room that smelled like antiseptic and goodbye. I spent 6 weeks in our apartment in Charlotte telling our son Beckett that everything would be fine, while knowing that nothing was fine and wouldn't be for a long time. Beckett was 12, old enough to understand death, too young to process it without watching his father to see if it was safe to fall apart. I held it together for him the way a cracked beam holds a roof structurally barely, and with the understanding that the next storm might finish the job. My mother called in March. Not a sympathy call. Mom didn't do gentle. She did solutions.
Nolan, You're a master electrician and a licensed plumber sitting in a two-bedroom apartment paying $1,900 a month in rent. Come home, bring Beckett. The house needs you and you need the house.
Home was 1.8 acres on Cutter Mill Road in Catawba County, North Carolina, a 3-bedroom brick ranch that my grandfather Earl Briggs built in 1979 with his own hands on land his father had farmed since 1952. The house had good bones the way my grandfather had good bones. Solid, square, unpretentious, and built to outlast everything fashionable. Hardwood floors, a stone fireplace Earl laid himself, a wraparound porch wide enough to watch thunderstorms roll across the Catawba River Valley, and an electrical panel wired so clean it looked like a textbook illustration because Earl Briggs had been a master electrician for 41 years, and he believed that sloppy wiring was a character flaw. The property wasn't connected to municipal sewer, never had been, never needed to be. Earl installed an aerobic septic treatment unit in 1994, a Clearstream 500 CS, the kind of system that uses a constant aeration chamber to break down waste biologically before dispersing the treated effluent through spray heads across the lower yard. It was state-of-the-art for its time, and still functioned perfectly, provided one critical condition was met. The aerator motor and effluent pump had to run continuously, 24/7, no interruptions, no power gaps. If power dropped for more than 45 minutes, the biological treatment process degraded, bacteria colonies died, untreated waste accumulated, and unlike a municipal sewer that sends everything downstream, an aerobic treatment unit keeps everything on site. The waste doesn't leave, it waits, it builds, it pressurizes, and if the system fails badly enough long enough, with enough accumulated volume, it finds a way out. The outdoor sub-panel that powered the septic system also fed 2 GFCI-protected outlets, one for the porch, one on the east wall facing the property line. Granddad had wired them on the same 20-amp circuit because in 1994, the nearest neighbor was a quarter-mile away, and the idea that someone would steal electricity from an outlet hidden behind azalea bushes was about as likely as someone stealing the view. My mother died in September of 2022, pancreatic cancer, the fast kind, the kind that doesn't negotiate. She left me the house, the land, and a handwritten note that said, "Your grandfather built this place to last. Don't let anyone take it from you." I moved in with Beckett in November. He was 14 now, lanky, quiet, with Cora's brown eyes and my stubbornness. He didn't complain about the smaller rooms or the slower internet or the fact that the nearest movie theater was 22 minutes away. He just unpacked his books, set up his desk by the window overlooking the back field and said, "This is good, Dad." I rebuilt what needed rebuilding, replaced the roof, updated the kitchen, rewired the garage for my workshop. I opened a small contracting business, Briggs Electric and Plumbing, covering residential work across 3 counties. 30 years of experience, a master license in both trades, and a reputation for showing up on time, finishing clean, and charging fair. The house sat at the end of Cutter Mill Road, which dead-ended at my property. Behind me was forest. To the east, separated by a row of azalea bushes and a chain-link fence my grandfather installed in 1996, was the back lot line of Tanner Creek Estates. Tanner Creek Estates was built in 2018 on 42 acres of former dairy pasture by a developer named Pinnacle Communities, a company whose business philosophy could be summarized as buy land that smells like cows, remove everything that made it interesting, install 92 identical houses with vinyl siding and composite decks, name the streets after trees that no longer existed because you bulldozed them during site prep, and sell each unit for $365,000 to families who wanted country charm, without any of the inconvenient parts of the country like dirt, livestock, neighbors who own tools, or the basic understanding that a house built on former dairy land is not a Manhattan co-op, and the governance thereof should not be treated as a constitutional convention. The HOA was governed by Sheila Dawson. Sheila Dawson was 38 years old, or 29, depending on whether you trusted the Botox, the filler, the microneedling, the glycolic peels, or the Instagram bio that listed her birth year as the same year Beyoncé released Lemonade, a coincidence Sheila treated as spiritual alignment. She was 5'8" in the golden goose sneakers she wore to patrol the subdivision every morning at 6:30. $590 Italian leather sneakers that were designed to look intentionally distressed, because in Sheila's world, even the appearance of imperfection had to be curated, purchased, and coordinated with the rest of the outfit. She was, by any conventional standard, beautiful. The kind of beautiful that makes you look twice and then immediately look away, because you can feel the contempt radiating off her like heat from a parking lot in August. High cheekbones that looked less God-given and more architecturally engineered, the product of a cosmetic dermatologist in Charlotte who charged $400 per syringe and had sculpted Sheila's face into something between a Vogue editorial and a weapon. Her lips were plump, symmetrical, and refreshed every 4 months with Juvederm at $700 per session, maintained with the same devotion and regularity that other women applied to oil changes, except Sheila's maintenance schedule cost more per year than a mid-range sedan and produced results that were visible at 50 feet but untouchable at any distance. Her hair was honey blonde balayage, hand-painted at a salon in South End Charlotte called Halo, where the stylist wore all black, the espresso machine cost more than a used car, and a single session ran $450, plus a $70 conditioning treatment that Sheila described as essential, with the gravity of a woman describing dialysis. The balayage cascaded past her shoulders in loose, effortless waves that required approximately 90 minutes of effort each morning, with a rotating curling iron, a diffuser, and 3 products whose combined retail value exceeded the weekly grocery budget of most families in Catawba County. Every strand knew its place, every highlight hit at the exact angle to catch sunlight, and every 6 weeks, every strand was re-highlighted at Halo, while Sheila sipped a cortado and approved or rejected exterior paint submissions for Tanner Creek on her rose gold iPad. She wore designer athleisure the way a dictator wears a military uniform, as a declaration of rank that permitted no questions. Her leggings were Aloe Yoga, $340 per pair, in colors named things like Dove and Ivory and Pristine, colors that announced to the world that this woman had never knelt in dirt, crawled under a house, or experienced any physical reality that might challenge the fabric's claim to cleanliness. Her zip-up jackets were Varley, $220, monogrammed with her initials in thread that cost extra. Her sports bra, visible through the strategic mesh panels of whatever layered outfit she'd assembled, from brands most of the subdivision couldn't pronounce, was $110, and engineered for Pilates, though Sheila's primary exercise was walking at a pace that communicated authority rather than cardiovascular effort. She accessorized the way other women breathe constantly, automatically, and with the understanding that stopping would be fatal. A Cartier love bracelet, $6,900, clasped permanently on her left wrist, because removing it required a proprietary screwdriver, which functioned as both a jewelry feature and a metaphor for her personality. Once attached, impossible to get rid of without specialized tools. Hermes orange sandals, $650, worn on weekends with the casual ease of a woman who had never considered that leather slides and a subdivision sidewalk might represent an aesthetic mismatch. Chanel sunglasses, $480, oversized, worn indoors during HOA meetings with the apparent belief that blocking eye contact while issuing fines constituted a leadership style. She drove a white Range Rover Autobiography, leased, not owned, though this distinction existed only on the financial documents Sheila kept in a drawer she never opened, the way a church keeps its exorcism manual. The monthly payment was $1,400. The vanity plate read, Sheila Q. The Q presumably standing for Queen, a title she had not been granted by any earthly authority, but had awarded herself with the confidence of a woman who believed that self-coronation was simply efficient governance. The bumper bore a single sticker, not bossy, the boss, a statement that managed to be both a personality declaration and a warning label. She sold real estate. Specifically, she sold homes in Tanner Creek Estates, the same subdivision she governed. She was simultaneously the regulator and the salesperson, the enforcer and the promoter, a conflict of interest she managed by refusing to acknowledge it existed. The way a woman with $700 of lip filler manages the concept of natural beauty through absolute unwavering denial. She'd been HOA president for 3 years. In that time, she'd issued 147 violation notices, filed 11 liens, and driven 2 families to sell their homes, which she then listed and resold, collecting a 6% commission on properties whose value she had personally maintained by terrorizing the previous owners into compliance and then out of the neighborhood. This was not illegal. It was, however, the kind of business model that would make a hedge fund manager feel self-conscious about his ethics. She parked her Range Rover in the HOA president's reserved spot at the clubhouse, a spot that did not officially exist in the CC&Rs, but which Sheila had created by having a sign installed and sending a violation notice to the first person who parked there, citing unauthorized use of designated community leadership parking. The homeowner, a software engineer named Dennis Park, paid the $75 fine because the alternative was arguing with Sheila Dawson, and Dennis had correctly calculated that $75 was less than the therapy he'd need after that conversation. Dennis now parked 3 spaces away and referred to the spot as the throne, which was more accurate than he intended. Her ex-husband Tyler Dawson had been a pharmaceutical sales rep, a career that required the ability to sell overpriced products to people who didn't need them, which in retrospect was excellent preparation for being married to Sheila. The marriage lasted 8 years. In the divorce, Sheila acquired the house, the Range Rover payment, $4,200 a month in alimony, and the absolute conviction that being divorced was not a failure, but a promotion, because she now governed without a cosigner. Tyler moved to Raleigh and was reportedly dating a woman who wore Target leggings and smiled without an appointment, which represented a significant improvement in his quality of life. That was Sheila Dawson, a woman who confused beauty with authority, expense with value, and a $6,900 bracelet with a crown. A woman who had spent 38 years believing that the world existed to be managed by people who looked like her, dressed like her, and never under any circumstance got dirty. She had never been dirty, not metaphorically. Literally, Sheila Dawson had, to anyone's knowledge, never been mud-splashed, rain-soaked, grease-stained, or exposed to any substance that could not be immediately addressed by a monogrammed Hermes hand towel. She existed in a perpetual state of editorial readiness, the kind of woman who could be photographed at any moment of any day and post the result without a filter. This detail will become important shortly. Sheila's property backed up to mine, Lot 87, the corner unit. With a composite deck, a hot tub, she photographed more than she used, and a backyard that ended at the chain-link fence separating Tanner Creek from my azalea bushes. The fence was my grandfather's, installed in '96, 5 feet inside my property line. The azaleas were my mother's, planted in 2004, now 6 feet tall and thick enough to hide anything behind them from casual view, including an electrical outlet. The east wall outlet, a standard 20-amp GFCI-protected duplex receptacle, sat 4 feet off the ground on the exterior of my sub-panel housing, same circuit as the septic. Granddad had wired them together because one 20-amp circuit was more than sufficient for the septic load, and the outlet was intended for occasional use, plugging in a work light, running a drill during exterior repairs. He never imagined someone would treat it like a community charging station. I first noticed in January of 2023, my electric bill jumped from $142 to $229, a 61% increase with no change in my usage. Everything was normal inside. The spike was coming from outside. I walked the exterior on a Saturday morning and found the first cord. Bright orange, 100 feet of 14-gauge extension cable running from my east wall outlet through a gap in the lattice skirt below my porch, under the azalea bushes through a hole someone had cut in the chain-link fence, cut, not opened with wire snips, and across 20 feet of Sheila Dawson's backyard to a junction box zip-tied to her deck railing. From that junction box, 3 more cords branched out. One to a string of LED landscape accent lights that lined her flagstone walkway, one to a heated outdoor cat enclosure, a $2,000 insulated unit with a plexiglass viewing window, because Sheila's Persian cats deserved climate-controlled outdoor access, the way other cats deserve a cardboard box, and one to a leaf blower hanging from a hook on her deck post. She had wired my electricity into her backyard, like a utility company operating without a license, a meter, or a conscience. I unplugged the cord. The next morning it was plugged back in. I unplugged it again. By Wednesday, it was back. On Thursday, I found a second cord, this one running to a battery charging station for her electric scooter. She wasn't just stealing power, she was expanding operations. The confrontation behind the azaleas, the one I described at the beginning of this story, happened on February 7th. Sheila's response, "It's just a trickle," told me everything I needed to know about her relationship with boundaries, which was approximately the same as her relationship with her ex-husband. She acknowledged they existed only when they served her purposes. I sent her a written notice, hand-delivered, dated, copied. "Please cease unauthorized use of electrical service at my property. The outdoor outlet is private property, not a shared utility." Her response arrived 2 days later, typed on HOA letterhead, custom stationery she'd had printed at a shop in Charlotte, with the Tanner Creek logo embossed in gold foil, because Sheila believed that gold foil was not an aesthetic choice, but a unit of authority. "Dear Mr. Briggs, the exterior outlet on the east elevation of your residence is positioned within the visual buffer zone, as defined in the Tanner Creek Estates Architectural Standards, Section 4.3.7. Exterior fixtures visible from community common areas. As such, any electrical fixtures within the visual buffer are subject to HOA review. Please submit Form ARC-12 for retroactive approval of your exterior outlet configuration. Sincerely, Sheila Dawson, President." I read the letter twice. Then I read Section 4.3.7, which addressed exterior light fixtures on HOA member properties and had absolutely nothing to do with electrical outlets on properties that weren't in the HOA. It was a complete fabrication, a legal-sounding paragraph designed to confuse a homeowner into believing that an outlet on his own house was somehow under the jurisdiction of a woman who couldn't tell a GFCI breaker from a Gucci belt buckle. I was not in the HOA. My property predated the subdivision by 39 years. My grandfather's deed was filed in 1979. Tanner Creek's plat was recorded in 2017. Sheila's authority over my electrical panel was exactly equal to her authority over the weather, which, knowing Sheila, she probably also believed she could regulate provided it submitted the appropriate variance form. I showed the letter to my attorney, Ray Jessup, a property lawyer in Newton, whose office smelled like coffee and case law, read it, removed his glasses, and said 3 words: "She's stealing power." I installed a lockout cover on the outdoor outlet, a heavy-duty, keyed, weather-rated steel enclosure designed for commercial construction sites. I bought it for $38, best $38 I ever spent, not because it stopped Sheila, but because what she did next was worth 10,000 times the investment. 3 days later, I walked outside and found the lockout cover pried open, not with a key, with a flathead screwdriver. The hasp was bent, the housing was scratched, and the orange extension cord was plugged back in, running its familiar route into Sheila Dawson's personal power grid. I replaced the lockout cover with a heavier model, this one with a padlock. I also installed a trail camera on the porch soffit, angled to cover the east wall, infrared, motion activated, date and time stamped, the kind of camera I'd used on job sites to document equipment theft, which was exactly what this was, except the thief wore aloe yoga and carried a designer tote instead of a crowbar. The trail camera captured Sheila Dawson on February 23rd at 6:42 in the morning, 14 minutes into her daily patrol, approaching my outlet, producing a pair of bolt cutters from a Goyard tote bag that retailed for $2,300, cutting my padlock and plugging in her extension cord. The bolt cutters looked wrong in her hands, the way a hunting rifle looks wrong in a museum, functional but aesthetically offensive to the person holding them. She looked over both shoulders twice, the universal body language of a person who knows they are committing a crime, but has decided that the crime is justified because they are beautiful, wealthy, and the HOA president, and because rules like padlocks were obstacles designed for lesser people. I saved the footage, I printed stills, I ordered a new padlock. She cut it again on March 2nd. This time she brought her own padlock and locked my outlet open, her master lock on my panel, ensuring continued access. She had locked my outlet in the unlocked position, so I couldn't shut her out. I want you to sit with that for a second. A woman who spent $6,900 on a bracelet cut my padlock off my electrical panel and put her own lock on it to ensure continued access to my electricity. That is not borrowing. That is not a misunderstanding. That is the behavior of a woman who has confused being beautiful with being entitled, and who genuinely believes that her cheekbones outweigh your property rights. Meanwhile, something else was happening. Something I hadn't connected yet. Something that was building underground in the dark, gallon by gallon, the way every disaster builds before it stops being a problem and becomes an event. The septic system was failing. It started with the alarm. The Clearstream control panel has an audible and visual alarm that triggers when the aerator stops running. I heard it for the first time on February 19th. I reset the breaker and moved on. It alarmed again on February 25th, and March 3rd, and March 9th. Each time the GFCI breaker had tripped, knocked offline by an overcurrent event on the shared circuit. Each time I assumed it was a wiring issue I'd need to troubleshoot. Then the smell started. If you've never experienced a failing aerobic septic system, count yourself fortunate. The aerator's job is to keep oxygen flowing through the treatment chambers so aerobic bacteria can break down waste. When the aerator loses power, those bacteria die. Anaerobic bacteria take over, the kind that produce hydrogen sulfide and methane gas, the compounds responsible for the smell of rotten eggs, swamp gas, and the particular brand of misery that makes you understand why ancient civilizations believed the underworld smelled bad. But the smell was only what you could detect from the porch. What was happening inside the tank was worse. Without the aerator, waste wasn't breaking down. Without the effluent pump cycling treated water wasn't leaving. The sludge layer was building, thickening, pressurizing, filling the chambers with untreated sewage that had no way out and nowhere to go. The methane accumulating above the sludge line was turning the sealed chambers into something between a holding tank and a bomb. The effluent spray heads in the lower yard, designed to disperse fully treated, nearly odorless water, had begun spraying partially treated sewage during brief windows when the pump had power. Thick, reeking effluent was clogging the small nozzle openings. The spray heads closest to the property line, closest to Sheila's fence, were the worst. They sat 12 feet from the azalea bushes in the low ground, where gravity had been directing waste spray for 29 years. My backyard smelled like something between a neglected porta-john and a moral failing, and I still didn't know why. Sheila saw the smell as an opportunity. Not a consequence, an opportunity. The difference tells you everything about who she was. On March 15th, I received an HOA violation notice typed on the gold foil letterhead, signed in the looping cursive of a woman who believed her penmanship was a form of governance. It cited Section 7.2.1 Nuisance Odors Affecting Community Quality of Life, and demanded I immediately remediate the septic-related odor, or face fines of $250 per day. I wasn't in her HOA. My property wasn't subject to her CC&Rs. And the odor she was complaining about was caused by her stealing the electricity that powered the system she was now fining me for failing to maintain. The circularity of it was almost beautiful, like watching a woman set fire to a building in a designer outfit and then fine the owner for smoke damage while posing for a selfie with the flames. I called Roper Septic Services. Dave Roper drove out the next day. He was 71, still crawling into septic tanks with the agility of a man half his age, and he'd serviced that specific Clearstream unit for 29 years. Nolan, I've seen this system run through ice storms, power outages, and that time your mother accidentally dropped a mop head into the access port in 2009. The unit is designed to handle brief interruptions, but what you've got here isn't brief. This is chronic intermittent power loss, the worst thing you can do to an ATU. How bad? The aerobic bacteria colony is 70% depleted. Sludge layer is 3 times what it should be. Effluent quality is testing at a BOD of 180. Should be under 30. He paused. But that's not what worries me. What worries you? Dave pointed at the pump tank access port. This tank is designed to hold about 80 gallons of treated effluent between pump cycles. Right now, it's holding close to 300 gallons of sludge. The float switch is buried. The pump can't cycle properly because every time it gets power, it tries to push thick waste through lines and nozzles designed for thin water. Most of it isn't going anywhere. It's backing up, pressurizing, and the methane buildup on top is making it worse. Meaning what? meaning this thing is a loaded gun. If that pump kicks on with a full surge, a hard start after a long outage, it's going to push all that pressure through the system at once. The weakest point gives first. Could be a spray head, could be a line fitting. When it goes, it's not going to be a leak. It's going to be a blowout. You're saying the system could explode. I'm saying the system wants to explode. Every time the power cycles off on it gets worse. One more hard surge and those spray heads down by the fence are going to blow like garden hoses with their nozzles clogged. He tested the GFCI circuit. It tripped when he plugged in a 1500-watt heat gun simulating the load of Sheila's devices on the shared circuit. There's your problem. Someone's drawing high amperage loads on this circuit. Every time they pull enough current, the GFCI kills the whole line. The aerator goes down, bacteria die, the pump tank fills, pressure builds, you reset the breaker and then the load hits again and kills it again. It's a cycle. Like restarting a patient's heart and then punching them in the chest every 3 days. That's when it clicked. Every alarm, every breaker trip. It wasn't the panel. It wasn't the 30-year-old unit. It was Sheila. Every time she drew 15 amps on a 20-amp circuit already carrying the septic load, she tripped the GFCI and killed the system. And every time the system died, the waste backed up a little more, the pressure built a little higher, and the spray heads clogged a little tighter. She was building a bomb out of my grandfather's septic system, 1 stolen kilowatt at a time. And she was doing it in $590 sneakers. Mike Treadwell from Catawba County Environmental Health drove out that afternoon, a practical man, mid-50s, who'd spent 25 years explaining septic systems to people who believed toilets were magic. He walked the property. He checked the spray heads. He looked at the sub-panel. He looked at the extension cord running through the azaleas. What's that? That's my neighbor stealing my electricity. Mike had seen septic systems fail because of tree roots flooding and homeowners flushing things that should never enter a septic system, including, on one memorable occasion, an entire Thanksgiving turkey carcass, which he told me about with the weary resignation of a man who had lost faith in humanity's relationship with plumbing. But he had never seen a septic system fail because a neighbor was stealing the electricity that powered it. He looked through the azalea bushes at Sheila's deck, the junction box, the extension cords, the heated cat enclosure with the plexiglass viewing window, evidence that was visible, documented, and producing a smell that served as its own testimony. Under cause of system malfunction, he wrote 4 words: unauthorized electrical service theft. Dave Roper's service report ran 14 pages. The control panel's internal log showed 17 GFCI trip events between January 14th and March 22nd. 17 times the system had gone down, 17 windows during which the pressure had built. I had the evidence, I had the reports, I had Dave Roper's warning that the system was a loaded gun. What I didn't have was time, because the next morning was March 25th, a Saturday, and Sheila Dawson had appearances to maintain. I was in the kitchen making coffee at 6:35 when the trail camera alert pinged my phone. I opened the app. There she was, 6:37 a.m., right on schedule, power walking down the path behind the azaleas in a white cropped Varley jacket and snow-white aloe yoga leggings. White, head to toe blinding editorial white, the kind of white that costs $340 per garment and exists to announce that the person wearing it has never encountered a substance she couldn't control. Her hair was perfect. The balayage caught the early March light. The Cartier bracelet glinted on her wrist. The Chanel sunglasses sat on her head like a tiara she'd purchased at a duty-free shop in a country that had done nothing to deserve her visit. She reached the outlet. She pulled the bolt cutters from the Goyard tote bag, $2,300 of hand-painted canvas, now serving as a felony toolkit. She cut the padlock, my third in 2 clean snips. She plugged in the main extension cord. Then she walked back through the gap in the fence to her deck and started plugging devices into the junction box. The landscape lights, the heated cat enclosure, the scooter charger, and the leaf blower, the 15-amp, 1200-watt leaf blower she used every Saturday morning to blow non-existent debris off her composite deck because Sheila Dawson believed that a clean deck was not a preference, but a moral position, and that leaves were a form of community disorder that required weekly correction with an appliance powered by someone else's electricity. 4 devices on a 20-amp circuit already carrying the aerator motor and effluent pump. I watched on the trail camera feed. I could see her standing on her deck in the white leggings, the white jacket, the honey blonde balayage, the Cartier, the sunglasses, a vision of curated perfection, plugging a leaf blower into a junction box zip-tied to her railing with stolen electricity. And I could see at the bottom of the frame the 3 spray heads in the lower yard, 12 feet from the fence line. 12 feet from where Sheila Dawson was about to receive an education in residential wastewater management that no amount of Juvederm could prepare her for. She turned on the leaf blower. The 15-amp draw hit the circuit like a hammer. For 2 seconds, maybe 3, the GFCI held. The leaf blower surged to full speed. Total draw on a 20-amp circuit somewhere north of 26 amps. The GFCI tripped. Everything went dead. The leaf blower wound down. The control panel alarm started beeping. But here's what happened in those 2 to 3 seconds before the breaker tripped. The 2 to 3 seconds that Sheila Dawson would remember for the rest of her immaculately maintained life. The effluent pump received a surge of power. After being off for 11 hours, the pump kicked on hard. Not a soft start. Not a normal cycle. A full power surge into a pump sitting at the bottom of a tank holding 300 gallons of pressurized gas-laden, untreated sewage sludge that had been accumulating for 4 months. The pump shoved. The sludge moved. 300 gallons of methane-pressurized waste hit the effluent lines like a freight train hitting a clogged drain. The line's 3/4-inch PVC, designed to carry water the consistency of weak tea, were half blocked with dried sludge from weeks of partial flow. The pressure spiked, the gas compressed and released, and the 3 spray heads in the lower yard, the ones 12 feet from Sheila's deck, did exactly what Dave Roper said they would do. They blew. Not sprayed, not leaked, not dripped, blew. The nozzle caps on 2 of the 3 heads launched off like champagne corks, an irony not lost on anyone since champagne was the only other pressurized liquid Sheila had previously allowed near her wardrobe. The 3rd head, the one closest to the fence, split at the fitting where the riser met the supply line. A geyser of dark, thick, reeking sewage, 4 months of accumulated human waste, dead bacteria, anaerobic sludge, and methane-infused liquid that smelled like the opposite of everything Sheila Dawson had spent 38 years constructing herself to be, erupted from the spray field in a fan-shaped arc that reached 6 feet in the air and traveled 11 feet horizontally. Directly into the most expensive outfit in Catawba County. The trail camera caught all of it. The first burst hit her from the knees down. The snow-white Aloe Yoga leggings, $340, worn once, designed for a Pilates studio in Tribeca, but deployed for Saturday morning deck maintenance in a North Carolina subdivision, turned a color that exists nowhere in fashion, nowhere in nature, and nowhere that a human being would voluntarily go. The second burst, propelled by the continued gas pressure releasing from the pump tank, caught her from the waist up as she turned toward the sound. The white Varley jacket, $220, monogrammed, designed for a light jog, but now experiencing what could only be described as a dark baptism, absorbed the full impact of pressurized sewage the way a 500 thread count pillowcase absorbs a mudslide, completely, irreversibly, and with a level of destruction that made the garment's original purpose seem like a cruel joke. The third burst, a sustained eruption from the split spray head lasting approximately 4 seconds, hit the Goyard tote bag sitting open near the outlet, the bolt cutters inside it, the fence post, and Sheila Dawson's $450 honey blonde balayage, which absorbed sewage the way a salon-quality deep conditioner absorbs moisture, except this was not moisture, and no amount of halo appointments would ever make this hair forget what had happened to it on March 25th at 6:39 in the morning. She screamed, the kind of scream that starts as surprise, escalates through disgust, peaks at horror, and settles into the specific frequency of a woman who has spent her entire adult life ensuring that nothing unclean, unpleasant, or unfiltered ever touches her, and has just been hit by 4 months of raw sewage in an outfit that cost more than some people's rent. The Cartier love bracelet, $6,900, clasped permanently to her wrist, impossible to remove without a proprietary screwdriver, was now coated in a substance that Cartier's warranty explicitly did not cover. The Chanel sunglasses, knocked from her head by the force of the second burst, lay in a puddle of effluent near the fence post. $480 of French craftsmanship, experiencing the French concept of la petite mort. Except this death was not small, and the experience was not metaphorical. She stood on her deck, soaked, dripping, coated from the golden goose sneakers to the honey blonde hair that had finally achieved the one look it was never meant to achieve, and screamed again. Not words, just sound. The sound of a woman whose entire curated, filtered, Juvederm-enhanced, Cartier-accessorized, balayage-highlighted existence had just been pressure-washed by the consequences of her own theft. That was how Sheila Dawson found out the outlet powered my septic system. Not from a letter, not from a lawyer, not from a polite conversation over the fence. From 4 months of backed-up sewage that her own power theft had created, propelled by the methane her own circuit tripping had generated. Through spray heads her own electrical abuse had clogged onto an outfit whose combined retail value, leggings, jacket, sneakers, bracelet, sunglasses, tote bag, and a balayage that would need to be completely redone, exceeded $6,000. The total value of the power she'd stolen was $158. The universe had calculated the exchange rate between theft and consequence, and it was approximately 40-to-1 payable in sewage. When Dave Roper watched the trail camera footage the next day, he sat in silence for about 10 seconds, then removed his cap and said, "In 29 years of servicing that unit, that's the first time I've seen it defend itself." I called the Catawba County Sheriff's Office at 7:04 that morning. Deputy Kevin Huang arrived at 7:32. He found Sheila inside her house, having left a trail of sewage-soaked footprints across her composite deck, through her sliding glass door, and onto the engineered hardwood flooring. She had changed clothes, but the smell had not changed with her. It had, in the way of truly committed odors, become part of the architecture, which was ironic since Sheila had spent 3 years as HOA president insisting that architecture was her specialty. The charges, 2 counts of Class 1 misdemeanor theft of electrical service and criminal tampering. The evidence, 22 documented instances of unauthorized access, 2 cut padlocks, 17 GFCI trip events, and 1 trail camera video of the HOA president being baptized by the consequences of her own decisions in $6,000 worth of designer activewear. Ray Jessup filed the civil suit. Total damages sought $15,300. The stolen electricity was worth $158. The septic remediation, blown spray heads, electrical repairs, lost property, use and attorney's fees were worth the other $15,142. Sheila's attorney, Craig Weber, whose experience in HOA law had not prepared him for a case involving sewage geysers and trail camera footage of his client dripping in raw effluent, advised her to deny everything. She denied plugging into my outlet. The trail camera said otherwise. She denied cutting the padlocks. The trail camera, the bolt cutters, and the $2,300 Goyard tote bag, now evidence and smelling accordingly, all said otherwise. And she denied being present when the spray heads blew. The trail camera footage, which showed her standing 12 feet from the eruption, in an outfit that had been white and was now a color for which the English language has no word and the fashion industry has no explanation, said otherwise with the eloquence of high-definition video and the poetry of raw sewage. The HOA board called an emergency meeting. 71 of 92 homeowners attended because the Catawba County Observer had published a story under the headline, "HOA President Charged with Stealing Neighbor's Power Septic System Exploded on Her." The subheadline, "She Then Fined Him for the Smell." The meeting opened with Sheila attempting to control the narrative. She stood at the front table with a printed agenda, a water bottle, and the posture of a woman who believed that procedure could substitute for innocence. I want to address the recent media coverage. The allegations are exaggerated. The situation with Mr. Briggs's outlet was a simple misunderstanding, ma'am. Bill Torres, Lot 24, retired sheriff's deputy, stood up. We've all seen the article. Did you or did you not cut a padlock off this man's electrical panel? That's being handled through legal. Did you cut the padlock? She said nothing. For the first time in 3 years of HOA meetings, Sheila Dawson, who had once fined a man $75 for parking in a spot she'd invented, had nothing to say. I handed Bill Torres a USB drive. The projector displayed the first clip, 6:42 a.m., February 23rd. Sheila, approaching my outlet with bolt cutters in a $2,300 Goyard tote bag, cutting my padlock, plugging in her extension cord. The second clip, March 2nd, cutting the replacement padlock and installing her own lock on my panel. The third clip, a compilation, 22 documented thefts over 10 weeks. Same woman, same route, same orange cord. Then the fourth clip, March 25th, 6:37 a.m. I let it play without commentary. 71 people watched Sheila in the white outfit cut the padlock plug in 4 devices, turn on the leaf blower. They watched the spray heads erupt. They watched the geyser of dark sewage arc through the morning air and hit their HOA president from the knees up, soaking the white leggings, the white jacket, the honey blonde balayage, the Cartier bracelet, and every square inch of curated perfection she had spent 38 years constructing. The room went silent. Then someone laughed. A single laugh, short, involuntary, immediately stifled. Then another. Then a sound that could only be described as the collective exhale of a subdivision that had been holding its breath since the day Sheila Dawson decided that beauty was a form of jurisdiction, and that looking expensive was the same as being right. I move to remove Sheila Dawson as HOA president, Bill Torres said. Seconded, said Karen Phelps Lot 41, who had been fined $200 for having a welcome mat depicting a cartoon cat, which Sheila had deemed inconsistent with the community's aesthetic standards. The vote was 68-3. The criminal case resolved in June. Sheila pled no contest to both misdemeanors theft of electrical service and criminal tampering. 12 months supervised probation. 120 hours of community service, which, for a woman who had never experienced physical labor, manual discomfort, or contact with any surface that wasn't sanitized, air-conditioned, or covered in Italian leather, represented not merely a sentence, but a philosophical crisis. The civil suit settled in August, $13,800. Craig Weber, who by this point had the exhausted pallor of a man who'd taken a case expecting a neighbor dispute and discovered he was defending a client whose crimes had been recorded in high definition and punctuated by a sewage explosion, negotiated the reduction from 15-3. Ray Jessup accepted because, as he told me, this case was so satisfying that I'd have done the last $1,500 for free. Sheila listed her house 2 weeks later. The new HOA board under President Dolores McKinnon, a retired high school principal who replaced 17 of Sheila's violation categories with a single standard, "Don't be a jerk," had suggested to the brokerage that having a convicted power thief as a listing agent might present a client confidence issue. The house sold for $328,000, $37,000 below average. Sheila moved to a condo in Gastonia. They fixed the fence. They planted knockout roses along their side. Beckett helped them dig the holes because that's what Granddad would have taught him. Help your neighbors, even the ones who hadn't been on your side, because community isn't an HOA, it's a choice. Dave Roper came out for the annual inspection last fall. Bacteria colony fully restored, CBOD under 20, TSS under 20, clean water dispersing across the lower yard. 30 years I've been servicing this unit. Your granddad built the best residential aerobic system I've ever maintained. The only thing that ever hurt it was a woman with an extension cord and a complete absence of boundaries. He paused, and the system hurt her right back. Beckett sat in Granddad's chair on the porch with a glass of sweet tea. He looked at the spray heads misting clean water into the grass. Dad, yeah. She really did. In the white leggings. He shook his head with the half smile of a 15-year-old who had witnessed the universe deliver justice in a form that no courtroom, no fine, and no amount of Juvederm could ever undo. Granddad would have loved that. I laughed. The kind of laugh that comes from relief from justice, from the quiet satisfaction of knowing that the system my grandfather built in 1994 was still working, still treating, still running the way it was supposed to. And that when someone tried to take what wasn't theirs, when they cut the padlocks and stole the power and broke the system that kept everything clean, the system found a way to deliver its own verdict. All it needed was power. consistent, uninterrupted, unstolen power. And a neighbor who understood, finally, viscerally, in a $6,000 outfit she would never wear again, that an electrical outlet on someone else's house is not a community resource. It's not a shared utility. It's not a trickle. It's someone else's property. And the consequences of taking what isn't yours don't care how much your leggings cost. They don't care about your balayage. They don't care about your Cartier or your Chanel or your Goyard tote bag. They build underground, in the dark for months, and sometimes on a Saturday morning in March they come back. At pressure, through a spray head, directly onto the most expensive outfit in the subdivision. It's the moment she found out what the outlet powered. And no amount of dry cleaning will ever make her forget it.
Sometimes the most thing a thief can steal isn't the most expensive, it's the most connected. Shelley Dawson stole electricity worth $158. That is, $158 worth of power over 4 months. But that electricity ran a septic system, and when it stopped running, 4 months of wastage didn't just disappear. It's accumulated, it's pressurized, it's weighted, and on a Saturday morning in March, it found its way out through 3 blonde spray heads across 11 feet of morning air and directly onto the most expensively dressed woman in Catawba County. She didn't lose because Nolan were angry. She lost because the consequences don't need a lawyer, they need physics. 17 breaker tubes created 300 gallons of backup sewage, and the sewage created the pressure. The pressure found the weakest point, and the weakest point happened to be 12 feet of where the thief was standing in $340 wet leggings and cardio bracelets and the $450 balayer that would never look the same again. The lesson isn't about septic system, it's about what builds when you take what isn't yours. Every stolen kilowatt added another gallon, every cut padlock added another day of pressure, and every time she plugged in that extension cord, she was filling the tank that would eventually empty itself onto her. If you've ever had a neighbor who thought your property was their property, drop a comment, subscribe for the next story. It involves an HOA president, a retired game warden, and a very expensive dog. See you there.